I'm Nadine Thornhill, sexuality educator. I'm hanging out in my bedroom, which means that today I am going to be kicking it vlog style, doing it a little bit more off the cuff, just sharing some thoughts. And today, the topic that I want to talk about is women. I'm a woman. And our sexual expression and experiences, particularly around pleasure, and how they relate or don't to our empowerment as women. Right off the bat, I want to be clear that I don't have a lot of conclusive thoughts or opinions on this topic. This is something that I think about a lot. It's something that I read about a lot. And the more I think and read about it, the more it really just brings up questions and nuances. And for me, it's a really complex issue. So this is not going to be a kind of vlog where, you know, at the end of it, I come to this nice, neat, tidy conclusion. I'm like, this is how all of these issues fit together. Nice, neat package. Here you go. Something that I've wrestled with for a long time, like since I was a teenager, is what does it mean when I, as a woman, am more gregarious in my sexual expression? You know, what does it mean when I'm more out there? If I choose to, for example, dress in a way that is, you know, more revealing, you know, if I'm wearing clothes that show, you know, more of my body, particularly, you know, like my breasts, my legs, whatever, if I'm wearing, you know, an outfit that's more body conscious, and I am doing those things specifically to, you know, have people think of me in a sexual way. You know, several years ago, or not several years ago, but a few years ago, you know, I, for a while, performed with a burlesque troupe, and, you know, that was a very overtly sexual activity. And there is a lot of opinion about, you know, women and what they choose to do with their bodies sexually, how they choose to express their sexuality, particularly, you know, when women are very open and explicit about their sexuality in the ways that I just described. And I found that often the cultural commentary kind of falls into one of two camps. So there are, you know, the people who are like, well, when a woman chooses to do X, that is sexual, it's oppressive. You know, she is either participating in her own oppression, or she's being influenced by, you know, other oppressive forces in society like patriarchy. And then there's sort of a response to that commentary, which is often, no, this is really empowering. You know, that this is, you know, women, you know, taking ownership of their sexuality. This is about women enjoying their sexuality. This is about women doing what they want to do. And so that is empowering because it feels good for them. Generally speaking, I agree with both of those perspectives. I mean, yes, absolutely. There are a lot of scenarios where, you know, women are oppressed or exploited sexually, and sometimes that may manifest in, you know, women feeling like they don't have a lot of choice in, you know, terms of how they dress, or they may feel like their best option to, you know, have any kind of, you know, agency, be that, you know, economic agency, earning money, or some kind of social agency, which is, you know, gaining some sort of acceptance and community, is to use their sexuality. And they may be doing that not because that's what they truly want, but because they feel that, you know, that is their best or only avenue. At the same time, I absolutely believe that there are contexts where women, you know, taking up space and expressing sexuality in, you know, open and even explicit ways can be empowering, because, you know, it can give the rest of us agency to, you know, do and experience things sexually that, you know, maybe weren't allowed before. And it can give us, you know, a broader range of experiences to choose from without being stigmatized for it. But then my question to myself is it always one or the other? And does it have to be one or the other? Like, is it either oppressive or empowering? Or are there situations where it can be neither? And if it's neither, can that still be okay? I'm only going to be talking today about how those things, you know, apply to me and the questions I have about what they mean for me in my own life. I've, definitely done the, dressing sexy and revealing thing. I did the burlesque thing for a while. Back when I was doing my undergrad, I was, a model for the art classes, and, I would do like all the nude poses, which I wouldn't say was sexual in the same way, but, I was naked and very aware that I was being naked, and it was, one of the first times that I had, shown my naked body in public. And I did that because I wanted to see what that experience would be like, what it would feel like to be naked in front of strangers. And, throughout my sexually active years, I've done a few other things that some people would consider, a little bit out there, a little bit explicit, in terms of how I expressed myself sexually. And, how I felt about those experiences after the fact varied. There were some things that I did and I was like, whoa, this was so much fun and I loved it. There were other things where I was like, okay, that was an experience, maybe not so much for me going forward. But I will say that, all of those things are things that I chose to do. They were all interesting experiences. None of those experiences for me personally, felt scarring or traumatic, even the ones where I was like, tried it, not so much anymore. And I don't regret doing any of those. And a lot of them actually brought me a great deal of enjoyment. A lot of them brought me, legit sexual pleasure. And if not sexual pleasure, definitely emotional pleasure, emotional enjoyment. I felt, happy that I did them. And a lot of those experiences did feel powerful, like on a personal, individual level. When I've dressed up in a sexy way and, I feel like I'm taking control over how people are perceiving me. And I do feel a certain, degree of power in being able to do that and being able to sort of influence the way that people respond to me in a way that I choose. I was able to overcome things like, my shyness. I felt good about my body afterwards. That made me feel powerful. But personal power isn't the only type of power that exists. And, when we talk about empowerment, or when I, hear or read other people's idea about empowerment, there's also sort of larger social empowerment. How do our actions as individuals either give or take away power from the people around us or from groups of people. So, for example, as a feminist, I'm also interested in how, people's actions and how my own actions contribute to, the social and political and economic and sexual, empowerment and equality of other women. And so when people talk about, sexual empowerment, then that is something that I think about, how do my actions contribute to, not only my own sense of power or my own ability to access power, but, is it contributing to other women's ability to access power, or is it hindering them? And that's where it can get more complicated. So I wonder, those choices that I've made, that I wanted to make and that resulted in experiences that generally made me feel good, how do they affect, other women? What messages do they send? Are they empowering in the broader sense? And I even asked myself, what was the context that led me to those decisions? So for example, when I talk about dressing in a sexy way, what might be the larger, ideas and concepts that influence what I think of as dressing in a sexy way, and where do those come from? Because, at the end of the day, I can't deny the fact that, okay, well, dressing sexy in our culture means, showing certain parts of your body or emphasizing certain parts of your body, your butt, your boobs, your legs, whatever. Yeah, of course that is rooted in a patriarchal idea of, women as these objects for generally men to stare at. It's not like I'm doing all this in a vacuum and I just came up with that concept of sexy in my own head. Of course I've been influenced by the culture, and ideas that are rooted in a certain degree of oppression, but that doesn't mean that it felt oppressive when I did it. And I don't know how to reconcile those two things. When I think about the fact that I'm a Black woman who has you know, chosen to be naked or near naked in, you know, public ways and performative ways. And, you know, there's still like conflicting realities there. You know, for example, I went to a predominantly white university in undergrad, and yeah, I was like out there in the art class, and you know, there probably weren't a lot of other, well, I know there weren't a lot of other black models in that art class. And so you had all these budding artists who, you know, were looking at my body with my like big old black titties, and like, I've got huge nipples, as a lot of black people do. And I think, well, okay, maybe that helped them to expand their ideas about the human body. And that could have, oh, sorry, there's a train coming through again. You know, that could have had a really positive influence on some of those budding artists. You know, maybe there, you know, is a little bit more diversity in Canada's art scene because some people got to sketch me as their life model. On the other hand, you know, there's this whole, you know, kind of ugly history in our culture around black women's bodies being sexual spectacle. You know, black women were, you know, enslaved and imprisoned and like forced to be on display because, oh, you know, their big voluptuous hips and thighs, and, you know, like this idea of black women's bodies as being hypersexualized. And so I think, well, you know, when I'm on stage in a burlesque show, on some level, am I perpetuating those stereotypes for people who already have those ideas in their heads? But at the same time, for other people who are like, oh, well, white, or yeah, desirability, sexual desirability is, you know, white and younger and like long flowing hair, which I obviously don't have, you know, that can help to bust some stereotypes. It can be both those things at the same time. So at the end of the day, I can't really quantify or qualify how my sexual actions have affected, you know, women as the group. I don't know. And I know that there are a lot of people out there who will say that simply by virtue of the fact that it was a choice I wanted to make, it was something that made me happy, that I was, you know, exercising women's empowerment, because women's empowerment is all about, you know, us being able to choose and us being, you know, agents of our own happiness. By a similar token, there are a lot of people who will say that, specifically as a black woman, that choosing and prioritizing my own happiness is an act of like social and political resistance because I exist within a society built on systems that are designed to deny me agency and happiness and my humanity. Broadly speaking, I do think that choice and happiness are connected to empowerment in a lot of cases. But I will also say that I sometimes feel some type of way when I hear people make the argument that, all right, if one is a feminist and if one is generally in favor of women's empowerment, then, and one is a woman, then anything you do that is your own choice and that makes you happy is by definition empowering. I don't think that that's necessarily always true, at least for me. It doesn't track for me that anything I do that is a choice that contributes to my own personal happiness is by its very definition empowering. You know, for example, you know, what if the thing that I chose to do that made me happy was, I don't know, having sex in strangers' cars? That's not empowering, that's trespassing, and it's, in my opinion, it's an asshole thing to do. I don't do that, I would never do that. But yeah, if I turned around and was like, no, it's empowering because as a woman, you know, I'm claiming space. I mean, I could say that, but that, like I said, that doesn't track for me. And so I'm like, there has to be, for me, more to a sexual choice than just, I chose it and I like it. Something else I ask myself is, do my sexual choices have to be empowering in order to be valid? I'm making myself happy, it's a choice. Can it just be that? Like, and still be valid, without having to also necessarily be empowering or an act of resistance or, you know, this act of self-care? Can it just be the thing that I'm doing because it feels good for me, period? I am not just this sum of my socio-political beliefs. I'm just a person, and I am just trying to live. And if I'm being honest, I sometimes feel a little resentful when I'm just doing things that are about me living and, you know, wanting to have certain experiences in my life that make me happy, and that's all it is. And then, you know, feeling like I'm obligated to kind of, you know, label it as some kind of larger socio-political act. Like, oh, it has to be empowering, it has to be resistance, it has to be self-care, like it has to have some utility beyond just my own personal happiness for it to be okay. It also aggravates me a little bit because in a weird way, I think it does offend some of my socio-political sensibilities, particularly, you know, as someone who identifies as sex positive. It's like, oh, if you're doing something pleasurable, particularly something that's sexual and pleasurable, you can't just be doing it for its own sake. It has to have some sort of larger, deeper, more important purpose. Otherwise, it's bad, it's frivolous, it's, you know, you're doing something terrible. It's bad, you're bad, unless you can find some way to justify it. And sometimes I feel like, yeah, well, it's empowering, you know, this is empowering for women. This is, you know, resisting white supremacy is, again, a way of trying to rationalize and justify, you know, why I'm, you know, showing off my body or being, you know, naked in art class or dancing around in a sparkly costume with, you know, tassels on my boobs on stage. Because you can't just do that because it's, you know, fun and enjoyable for you, Nadine. You have to, you know, you have to be fighting the cause and then it's okay. And I'm like, well, no, I don't. Do I? I don't know. So in conclusion, no conclusion. You know, I don't know what it means that I seem to have this low-key, like, performative aspect to my personality that sometimes spills over into my sexual expression. Sometimes I like being a bit of a sexual show-off and it makes me feel good, but I don't know what that means, you know, in terms of my being empowered or oppressed. I certainly don't feel oppressed by it, but I don't know, you know, if I'm really making meaningful contributions to anyone's empowerment other than my own. And even sometimes I'm like, I don't know if it's that I feel powerful, I just feel good. Anyway, in the comments below, let me know, how would you define sexual empowerment? How would you define women's empowerment? And you can tell me how you define that either, you know, in a broad sense, you know, for society at large, or you might just want to talk about how you define that for yourself. I would love to hear about that. That's all. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you soon. Bye. Well, no, not ready. Hang on. There's someone outside my bedroom. There's someone outside on the street who's talking. I don't know how long they're gonna be there, but ignore them. And in the grand scheme of things, my actions as an individual are only going to influence, you know,